Hi, and welcome back to Psychology with me, Mr. Snyder. And today we're going to start in on our domain about development and talk about just setting up the topics of development. What are we going to be talking about? So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to use methods, or at least discuss the methods used to study development. We're going to talk about the issues in development and how just a little bit of review on the biological factors that we've already talked about and how nature versus nurture can affect us as humans. So here is a little table about the 3 research designs. I thought this was just good enough to explain what we needed. So basically, you've got your cross-sectional, you've got your longitudinal, and then you've got something that's kind of a combination of those two called cross-sequential. So cross-sectional means that different participants are used to study something over time. And basically, instead of following the same people for 20 years to see how they can change, a cross-sectional design takes one group of 20-year-olds, one group of 40-year-olds, and one group of 60-year-olds all at one time to see how they're different. Longitudinal design would follow the same participants, and these studies do take a long time. So study 1 would study the same people at 20 years old, study 2 would be 20 years later when they're 40 years old, and study 3 would be 20 years after that when they're 60 years old. And cross-sequential means we're doing different participants of various ages at several points in time. So study 1 would be a group of 20-year-olds and a group of 40-year-olds. And then study 2 would be that same group of 20-year-olds who are now 25, 5 years later. And group 2 would be the same group of 40-year-olds. 5 years later, they are now 45 years old. So let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each of those. Basically, human development means we're talking all the way from conception until death, and that's a long time. So every aspect of change along those lines is what a developmental psychologist will study. The participants who are exposed to the independent variable in any experiment should be randomly assigned to the different experimental conditions in these research designs. The disadvantage is that the people in the study should always be an independent variable, but people cannot be randomly assigned to different age groups. So that's why we have these longitudinal, cross-sectional, and cross-sequential designs. The longitudinal, the advantage is that it looks at the real age-related changes. And we know that it is due to the age because it's in the same individual and not different individuals. The disadvantages is the length of time it takes to study them, money, they're very, very expensive, and effort. Throughout the study, people may die, they may move, they may lose interest and not want to participate in the study anymore. So it's very scientifically valid, but it is very expensive, and people don't want to stay in a study that long. The cross-sectional design is quick, relatively expensive. The disadvantage is that since we're comparing changes, we can't compare changes to the same individuals as they age. So any change between a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old could be due to the fact that they're different people and not due to their age. And then also we have what is called the cohort effect on a cross-sectional design. The cohort effect is when the group of people have come up and grown up during a common time period and shared life experiences. And that could affect their change as well. So somebody who is 50 or a group of people who are 50 versus a group of people who are 20 have grown up in different time periods and had different life experiences, and change could be due to those as well. And then the cross-sequential design is kind of a mixture of both, and the advantages, it kind of takes away the disadvantages of both, but it's less scientifically valid than the longitudinal design. So basically we have 2 questions in developmental psychology. continuity versus discontinuity, or I like to say continuity versus stages. Does development happen in a smooth, continuous progression, or is it stages? And then stability or change. So what about a human remains stable over the course of a lifetime, and what changes? And the answer to both of those, it's not very clear cut. It has to do with what we're talking about. What exactly are we talking about? Three areas of development that we'll talk about in developmental psychology are physical development, which is obviously your physical features that does occur in clearly defined stages that are distinct from one another. Cognitive development, which obviously changes over time but in a continuous fashion. And our psychosocial development, which is our emotions and our social lives. In psychosocial development, we'll also assess a person's temperament, or their basically a person's innate personality and emotional characteristics, which does tend to stay very stable over time. And a person's attachment, which is the first emotional bond a child forms with its caretaker. And we'll also take a look at that. And then nature versus nurture. They both have an effect on our life, on our personality, on us as humans. Nature are your basically what you're born with, your heredity, physical growth, intellectual growth, social interactions, how much of your heredity has to deal with that. And then nurture is the influence of the environment you were brought up in on those same things. Talking about parenting styles, your physical surroundings, your environment, economic factors, anything that can influence you but does not come from your heredity. Here's a picture of a DNA molecule. I'm just going to sort of go through this. We've already talked about genetic influences. There's not really a need to do it again. We know about DNA molecules. You can pause this if you'd like. We know about genes. We know about disorders, obviously, that can come on the dominant gene. And we've already talked about recessive gene disorders. Chromosomes, and basically each sperm and egg have 23. Together they form 46, but a missing or an extra chromosome can cause problems in development, and some examples of chromosome disorders. Environmental influences range from parents or caretakers in early childhood, friends and teachers in mid to late teens, and then the culture one is brought up in as well. And that is all I have for you today. That is your quick introduction to development. Next time we'll talk about basically prenatal and childhood development. So look forward to that. Bring your questions to class, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.